Hello, thank you for tuning in. My name is Mary Valine, and today I'm joined by retired Battalion Chief Mark Emery from the Woodinville, Washington Fire and Rescue Company. Mark is a fourth-generation firefighter professional, and he's also developer of the Command Competency Clinic and co-developer of the Integrated Tactical Accountability System. He has authored many great articles and books, such as The 10 Commandments of Intelligence and Fireground Operations, Fire Station Pyramid of Success, and Grading the Fireground on the Curve. He continues to serve as a contributing editor with Firehouse Magazine, FDIC, Size Up, and other respected fire industry publications, and he's also a regular presenter at conferences across the country. My question as I started off was, describe Mark Emery, the retired Operations Battalion Chief with the Woodinville, Washington Fire Department.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. I retired in November 2010 after 30 years as a firefighter, and currently serve as fire commissioner. But basically, I think to sum it up, I'm a lifelong learner and student of life, and I've always been curious and observant and tried to have a good attitude, which I think one of the most important things you can have in life is a good attitude.
And how did you end up in the fire industry?
Well, my dad was a retired firefighter. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he served in Long Beach, California, as a whole lot of my other relatives. His stepdad, and in fact, one of my dad's relatives is now the fire chief in Long Beach, California. Last name DeRee, and in fact, I remember when my dad's uncle, who was Alan DeRee, was the fire chief during World War II. And he used to come by our house after he retired, and on every Sunday it seemed like he'd come by if we were in town or he was in town. And I remember my dad would give him a little glass of sherry, and he'd sit and talk for an hour, and he'd take off and go visit another family member. But so the fire service, hanging around the fire station, was what I did for as a kid, along with my friends. We'd ride our bikes down to the fire station. My dad ended up in a fire station close to where we lived, which was near California State University at Long Beach, Fire Station 22 down there. And used to hang around with the crew there, and we just had so much fun with those guys. It was, but I didn't want to do what my dad wanted me to do, so I became a school teacher and moved to Seattle, Washington, and moved to a small community named Duval, Washington, and became a volunteer, and immediately got hooked. And so, my dad was right. This is fun, and this would be a pretty fun and rewarding way to earn a living. And so I started testing and got hired, and the rest is history.
Oh, fun. So you were a teacher for maybe a year before it got you?
A couple of years,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple of years.
Teacher and football coach.
And I understand now that you have a passion for writing and teaching, and specifically fire officer development. Is that where that came from, your teaching background? Have you always had an interest in that?
Well, as far as writing, I've enjoyed writing since I was in high school. I don't think I really knew I enjoyed it, but what that meant. I just knew I would rather write than take a test, and of course that helped me in college. In fact, I used to write my wife's when we were dating. I used to write a lot of her papers for her when she was in nursing school.
And teaching was always just natural.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and maybe that's because I enjoyed coaching. And coaching and teaching in the fire service, especially for a lot of the manipulative skills, is kind of the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's just easier working with firefighters than 14, 15, 16-year-old kids.
Can you name a highlight in your career?
Oh, boy, I guess there's no one single highlight that I can think of. The highlights, I think, just been the opportunity to be able to contribute to the fire service overall mission and the opportunity to help firefighters become the best they can be. I think it's kind of an ongoing highlight.
Mark, your career is fascinating, and we could talk all day. I appreciate hearing the history of how you became a firefighter and what motivates you to write and continue working so hard for the fire service. But now we're going to move on and ask a couple questions on a more personal level to get to know you. So what do you like to do in your spare time?
Well, spare time, boy. Let me see. Of course, investing time with family, I really enjoy that. I snow ski that's one way to get through the winter in the Pacific Northwest. Got some great mountains close to where I live. for skiing. I played the tenor banjo since I was, probably 12 years old, I guess. And I like to read. Of course, I like to write. I like to conjure up new ways to improve things, I think. Travel. I'll usually, frolic with my dogs, stuff like that.
Oh, fun. Do you have a favorite author?
Favorite author, boy. But I enjoy Stephen King. It's for fiction. I think he's a fantastic writer. In fact, he wrote one of my favorite books on writing, and in fact, it's called On Writing, about how to write. It's one of my favorite books, more than his scary books. John Wooden, I read a lot of his stuff. He's kind of my official mentor, although he never knew that. But I've read just about every book that's been published about or by John Wooden.
And can you tell us 5 things that people don't know about you?
5 things that people don't know about me. I wear a 10.5 shoe. Born in 1953. Like I said, I used to coach sophomore football team at Millikan High School in Long Beach, California. Did that for 3 years before moving to Seattle. Let's see. Well, I mentioned John Wooden's my official leadership mentor. One last thing is people are, when I tell them, are usually pretty amazed when they find out that I graduated from Stanford when I was 14 years old.
That is amazing. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, that sounds amazing until you find out the other half, that it was Stanford Junior High School. Not Stanford University. So sometimes the rest of the story matters.
Yeah, so you have a sense of humor, too. We just learned that. We'll add that to number 6. Did you play football before you coached?
I did, high school and college in Long Beach.
So you speak on a variety of topics, but is there one message that you hope and want each of your students to leave with?
Yeah, I think it's my personal credo that I've tried to live by since I was in college, and very simple. It's what you learn after you know it all that's important.
Oh, very good. So we also have a couple questions here that were put together by Tom LaBelle, who is the executive director for the New York State Fire Chiefs Association, and that's also the organization that's hosting the company officers leadership training that you'll be speaking at coming up here. So he wants to know, what do you think the greatest changes have been in the fire service the last 10 years?
Boy, I think the greatest change has been the awareness and energy behind firefighter safety and health and safety, probably, if you want to include fitness and nutrition and things like that, the wellness. And I think the epicenter, the emphasis on fireground safety, on the structural fireground, is video. And I think you can trace back that the epicenter of the emphasis on safety today is the 1988 Hackensack Ford dealership fire video that was produced by American Heat. And because that made it not abstract anymore when you hear the firefighter die, it wasn't a statistic or a story from the inside of a newspaper. This was, you're right there watching it on evolve on television. And then you dovetail that with, back then, the U.S. Fire Administration starting to do fatality investigation reports. Now NIOSH does that, of course. And then all of that really started to clear up the abstract, when firefighters die, that they're instantly a hero. I think for the first time, I know this is controversial to say this, but for the first time, people have been seeing and reading about firefighters who are dying as heroic victims rather than dying as heroes. And there's a difference between dying as a heroic victim and a hero. If you're going to die trying to save something and be a hero, that means you're trying to save something with at least as much value as a human life. And if fire officers had considered on a lot of these fireground operations that ask the question, okay, what has the most value on this fireground right now? Once you determine your firefighters represent the most value, they shouldn't die. And I think one of the key considerations for an incident commander, safety officer, fire division group supervisors is who and what has the most value right now. And again, once you determine your firefighters represent the most value, it's your responsibility to do whatever it takes to preserve and protect that value. Because often firefighters die in buildings, and had somebody asked that question, they would have found out the firefighters represented the most value. Still preserving the mission and history and tradition of the fire service, but I think recognizing the firefighters have value and are part of the life safety component of a fireground operation. And remember, the firefighters always arrive with 100% value.
Right.
Once they get there.
Right.
and so if you start there with, firefighters always arrive with 100% value, that helps kind of square some corners on decisions.
Right, and we have seen our deaths for firefighters trending down in the recent years, so
yeah,
that continues.
Yeah, which is good news. And I think as wellness improves, and just a little thing like fastening your seatbelt and keeping it fastened, is not revolutionary or an extraordinary effort. That's pretty fundamental and simple. But the people working on that, Mike Wilbur and some other people, that's a noble effort. That why people still don't fasten their seatbelt is beyond me.
Correct.
When that's the number 2 killer of firefighters.
Yep. Well, and that is the thing. Tradition takes a long time to change, good or bad. So.
Yeah, I think we've always had a proud history and tradition of aggressive tactics. One of my personal missions is to drop the pebble in the pond, that I think we need to have a equally proud history and tradition of aggressive strategy. And that's one thing you never hear is people saying, we have a proud history and tradition of aggressive strategy in my fire department or at my command post or as a fire service. And I think if we can have a proud history and tradition of aggressive strategy that is at least equal to the proud history and tradition of aggressive tactics, and then dovetail those two things, I think that will help create that culture of everybody goes home and acknowledgement of value and preserving and protecting value. The problem is aggressive strategy is much more difficult than aggressive tactics.
Aggressive strategy is,
it's
yes.
physically difficult.
Yep.
But intellectually and mentally, it requires poise and confidence. You have to be able to slow things down, determine value, take the time to do a size up, identify what Tom Brennan said many, many years ago. I read a little piece by him where he said the 3 most important things that a fire officer can identify is, number 1, the location of the fire, number 2, the location of the fire, and guess what the third one was? Location of the fire. And if you don't do a size up and the fire's in the basement, you go into the front door with a hose line, you've missed all 3 of those if you haven't done a size up and located the fire.
So having said all that, where do you see changes coming from in the next 10 years?
The next 10 years, wow. Well, I think you're going to see a lot more officer development, emphasis on that will become just as big an investment in time and energy and resources as firefighter development. We'll spend weeks and months preparing a firefighter, and really some fire departments don't spend much time at all preparing company officers and chief officers. So I think that's something that's going to come around in the future, and I think adapting to the new normal, as people call it, financially, I think that's going to take some big adjustments. But fire service is pretty adaptable and creative. So I kind of see it as it'll be a healthy exercise for the fire service. It'll be painful, but it'll be healthy.
I thought that I had heard that years ago we started that process of some of the baby boomers retiring, and so we are preparing more chief officers. Do you think we're halfway through that process or not quite? Or do you think we're still going to, or is it just the time that's going to increase, but not necessarily the quantity of people retiring?
I'm not sure about that. I think there was a lot of communities, because of the rapid growth, during the 80s and 90s, hired a lot of people, and now it's plateaued, and we're going through the so-called economic crisis. But there's a lot of those people that probably are not going to get replaced as they retire. So there's going to be a lot of loss of experience and institutional knowledge that's going to be lost and not replaced.
This is a question from Tom again, and he says, is there any question or complaint that you hear repeated from your students as you go around and speak at different conferences?
Oh, well, it depends on what I'm teaching. If I'm doing ITAC or the incident management classes, or leadership classes, occasionally you'll hear. Actually, most often you'll hear, why isn't the chief here? Why isn't our battalion chiefs not here? They need to know this. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, I'll teach some places where the fire chief is not only there and front and center, but when we're going to do simulation exercises, and I say, do I have a volunteer to be the incident commander on this first scenario? The chief officer is the first guy to jump up and say, sure. And boy, I think that takes a lot of guts. To take the chance of crashing and burning. I make it safe to crash and burn in the classroom, and encourage people to do it there rather than in the field, because I think you learn a lot by crashing and burning when there's no consequences, other than maybe bruising your ego. But so you got one end of the spectrum, there's no chiefs there at some classes, and on the other end, not only are there chiefs there, but the fire chief's there, and he's the first individual to stand up and say, sure, I'll do it. That takes guts. People are always watching the leaders, and they're always watching what they're doing and where they are, and officers need to be aware of that.
So Tom had also asked, what question do you wish they asked?
Boy, I don't know if this is going to be a kind of circuitous answer to that, but I remember when I was chief of training, a friend of mine had just got promoted to lieutenant, and I remember he approached me and said, and this was his first shift, first day on shift as a company officer. The shift before that he worked, he was a firefighter. And he walked up, I was chief of training, said, a few months ago I had a good test day, and today I'm reporting for duty as a lieutenant. I got the promotion. And he goes, I'm very nervous because the fire district invested far more time and energy preparing me to be a firefighter than for this day when I'm a company officer. So basically he was saying, I had a good test day, so today I'm a company officer. And boy, and I had only been chief of training for a couple of years at that point. And it just struck me that, boy, that seems pretty crazy.
Right.
And so you can complain about it, or you can look at things as an opportunity. It's a problem or an opportunity. And it was a problem he identified, so I saw it as an opportunity as chief of training to do something about that. So what we ended up with in 1995, we offered our first King County Officer Development Academy. But this is an academy with testing, lesson plans, objectives, syllabus, certification testing, and it's a 6-week academy. So since 1995, we've had a 6-week Company Officer Development Academy in King County, Washington. And the weeks are spread throughout the year, like a week in March, a week in April, a week in May, et cetera, and then starts up again in the fall. So the people have the opportunity to attend all 6 weeks, and they have a couple of years to complete the whole academy, or they can just sign up for a couple of classes. And since it started up in 1995, I've been teaching the 4-day 3 college credit building construction class since 95 that I was able to develop and teach. So it's been that's one way when people ask the right question, I guess I'd say, and identify a problem, that how can you turn that in a solution to that problem, if there needs to be one. In officer development, I thought there needed to be one. It's a lot of people to bring about success. Coming up with the ideas is the easy part.
Yeah. So the last question that he had is that if you could make one sweeping change in how we handle command functions, what would it be?
Oh, I think that would be achieving and maintaining tactical accountability as a command function. And that's after officers have done the size up and they've developed an initial incident action plan, et cetera. But it's something I call tactical accountability. And this aligns with NFPA 1561. And NFPA 1561 says that if anybody functioning as a division or group supervisor, and that means that you're talking to Engine 1, Truck 1, Rescue 1, you're responsible for those teams, that you need to know not only that you're responsible for them, but you need to know what they're doing or where they are at all times. Of course, NFPA doesn't tell you how to do that any more than they tell you how to do anything. Standards and mandates just tell you what you're supposed to do, and then as the authority having jurisdiction, you figure out how that's going to happen. So I came up with ITAC, which is a system designed to comply with 1561, NFPA 1021. It makes it a very simple way to know that if I'm responsible for Engine 1, I always know where they are and what they're doing. That's using passports for accountability. So if I've got Engine 1's passport, and that passport represents Engine 1's ticket to play. They don't get in the game without a ticket, because if they get in the game and I don't have their ticket, then they're freelancing, and I don't know what they're doing or where they are as part of my overall incident action plan. I think one of the most important things for incident commanders to get into their command post and into their, how they manage an incident is to make sure that everybody is tactically accounted for. I think that would not only should the officers know that, otherwise, if you're outside and you're called Division A or Command or Division 29, and you don't know, you know who you're responsible for, but you're not exactly sure where they are or what they're doing. What exactly are you managing?
Interesting.
You're a spectator in a colorful vest, basically.
And you think that happens quite a bit? Either the
Well, I think most of the fire departments in this country don't. Not only do they not know they're supposed to maintain tactical accountability, and that's what I call that, tactical accountability. But I think even if they know that, I think there's very few fire departments that know how to do that. Well, it's not difficult. And plus, the passports are very heavy.
Mark, thank you very much for your time today. It's been fascinating to hear about your history and learn a little bit more about you. We could go on and on. You are still active in the fire service as a commissioner in the state of Washington, and you are also the president of IMS Alliance. So hopefully in the future we find the opportunity to talk again.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. I appreciate the opportunity, and also the New York Fire Chiefs and Chief LaBelle. I look forward to being able to contribute. It's an honor and a privilege, so thank you.
respected fire industry publications, and he's also a regular presenter at conferences across the country. Today we talk to Mark on both a personal and a professional level. My question as I started off was, describe Mark Emery, the retired operations battalion chief with the Woodinville, Washington Fire Department.